Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and ask any and all of the questions you have about everything related to trans issues. You get to ask those questions to two trans people. So you are, coming straight from the horse's mouth, I guess you could say. I am your host today, Arden Hart, and with me is our wonderful guest,
Hello.
Luxander.
Yes,
What's
I'm
up?
Luxander. The sky, I don't know. I'm just like
Nice.
there's so much news all the time. Everything is up. Everything is happening constantly. So we're just kind of like trying to get through day to day. That's how we're doing. I'm sure
Feel
that you can
that.
relate. That's how we're doing.
Also, I didn't log in on Call-In Studio on my second PC, which is how I get those little banners up. So let me get that all set up.
Yeah, you're producing today.
Yes.
Mhm.
So to the audience who is like, Arden, you're alive. You were supposed to be on the last 2 weeks and you canceled one episode and then just didn't show up on the other one. Yeah, I've been really fucking sick for like 2.5 weeks. I had a viral stomach infection, like a stomach flu, gastroenteritis, and was like violently ill for a couple days. And then when that kind of resolved, but then I didn't feel better, I was like, what is happening to me? I'm dizzy all the time. Turned out I got an ear infection, which I had one like 2 months ago that I missed Takis for. But this one went so far into my ear that it was pressing on my vestibular nerve and making me dizzy all of the time and ended up in me falling over, luckily on like the carpet. So I did not sustain an injury, but it was very clear that I needed to go to the hospital and get that taken care of. So that's where I've been. Very much not well, but I'm back and I'm actually feeling good. Today's the first day I haven't felt dizzy without the help of medication. So awesome. I'm finally feeling like a human being again. But what's been up with you, Lex? It's been a while since we've had you on the show, so
Yeah, it's been a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I just been pretty busy this summer. I've had a lot of stuff going, and like the Renaissance Festival just happened, which I was talking about before the show.
yeah.
It's always time. I highly recommend, by the way, anybody in the audience, if you've ever, if you're like, I don't want to go to Pride because it's in June, maybe check and see if there's a local Renaissance fair. They happen, I think there's like over 200 different ones across the country. Some of them are only going to run like one weekend. Some of them aren't going to be as fancy as other ones. But interestingly, I read an article about how Renaissance fairs were first like started in America. Like the very first one was held in 1963, and it was founded basically by a woman who was formerly a teacher in California. And when the Red Scare and like HUAC and everything were happening, apparently they like started to require public school teachers to take loyalty pledges to the United States of America. And she was like not comfortable with that. So she was essentially sort of, I think, non-officially labeled a communist. And she also knew a bunch of people who worked in Hollywood who like were being labeled communists through this system. And they couldn't find any work. And so she invited them to like start the Renaissance Fair with her. So the first one was in 1963, and it was just a bunch of like actors and other folks who were having a hard time finding work, um, getting together and doing shenanigans and like doing lane acts, basically like improv work in the lanes. And like that's kind of the spirit that still carries on. I'm friends with a lot of people who work in the cast, and they just seem to really get a lot of energy from like interacting with people and giving them a really special experience of like you just met a fairy, like ooh, magic in your life. It's pretty cool. So I thought that was neat.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I love that.
Mm.
Um, we are going to move on to do our polls real soon, but before we do that, I want to remind everyone, first off, we hit 100,000 subscribers yesterday here on the line. That is so sick. It is so awesome. Jimmy and Matt did a super long episode of The Hang Up, and y'all did some awesome donations. So thank you guys so much for subscribing and watching the stuff we do here on the line. It is such an honor to be working with these people and to watch this network grow. We started Takis like 2 years ago, last March. So it's been rolling for a long time, and it's been really exciting to see all the stuff that's happened and how the show's grown and developed and kind of really taken on a solid identity, and that's really cool. Also, if you want to support us, we have finally started to get the inklings of LineCon pulling together. So if you would like to support us and see LineCon happen and see LineCon be big and awesome, if you could support us over on patreon.com/calltheline, that is the best way to support the network and all the hosts here. So that is my quick little plug before we move on and do our polls. I wasn't here last week. Neither was Lux, but we will jump in on this anyway.
Let's
So
do it.
last week's poll was: is it a good thing that trans women are winning beauty contests like Miss Universe? We had a 69% yes and 31% no.
Nice.
I'm going to be really charitable. I have not read the comments at all. And I'm going to assume that people are saying no because, like, beauty pageants are sexist and reinforce misogynistic tropes. And so it's just, they're bad if anyone wins them.
Yeah.
But I'm
Because
willing
normally
to bet.
the polls on this channel skew pretty hard in like a pro-trans direction.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely had some, reasonable questions types. But I'm going to guess that that's a lot of what that is, because that's such a high no answer to me. I can't imagine it's just people thinking it's bad for trans women to be in beauty contests.
Yeah, it's got to be an indictment on beauty contests to some extent.
Yeah, but if it's people saying no, trans women specifically shouldn't be in beauty contests and beauty contests are fine, I would like to see what their reasoning is, because it's not like do trans women have a competitive advantage in beauty contests as well? Like, what is the justification here? I think it's fine, and if they're going to happen, and then all women should be allowed to compete in them. But I personally don't have strong feelings on beauty pageants in general, so.
I mean, that's basically where I stand on it as well. Like, I'm not going to answer no on this kind of poll, because I do think that, like, any situation where women are competing, then trans women should be allowed to compete, like, whatever that avenue is. If people want to say, oh, it's unfair because of plastic surgery, then okay, make rules around who is allowed to have plastic surgery, I guess. Like, not saying that like trans people are not allowed, but rather like if you have had plastic surgery, period, then you can't participate, or create different arenas for different people or whatever, like who are allowed in different spots. Because you just address the actual problem that you have. If the problem is, oh, these people have an unfair advantage because of body modification, effectively, like, but yeah, otherwise, I mean, and that requires obviously a ridiculous level of scrutiny on people's medical backgrounds that I would not agree with personally. But if the private organizations want to make those rules, then sure, but like don't make them discriminatory on the basis of transness. And like, yeah,
Right.
I don't think beauty contests in general are like a positive thing or like good for society in general. But I mean, again, if you're gonna have them, trans women have to be invited to the table.
Yeah. I think all that's good and fair. I didn't even consider the way that body modifications could be considered objectionable, but yeah, then you have to consider who else is getting body modifications that's not being scrutinized and all of these kinds of things. But anyway, that was last week's poll, and this week's poll might be a little more spicy, might inspire a call. We'll see. So this week's poll is voting Joe Biden the exact same as voting for Trump? Now, I already hear you guys screaming, the wording on this poll sucks. Obviously, it's not the exact same because I'm voting for different people. Hear me out. In the wake of Joe Biden's lackluster, and that is me being as generous as possible, response to the Israel-Palestine conflict, playing defense, for Israel in a lot of ways, I've seen a lot of people saying that they are no longer going to vote, or they're not going to vote for Joe Biden, and that voting for Biden and voting for Trump is the exact same thing. And Lux and I were talking about this beforehand, and Lux pointed out that some people might live in a state where their vote actually doesn't really matter, and if they don't vote for Trump or they don't vote for Biden, it actually doesn't have much of an impact. And in which case, I would say, okay, that's fair, but you have a very particularly unique situation where your protest kind of doesn't have an impact on people. But if we're going to pretend that a Trump presidency and a Joe Biden presidency are exactly the same because they would both support Israel in this conflict, I'm sorry, but there are other things going on in the world as well that are also important. Not that this isn't an important issue, not that this isn't an issue that's kind of rightly dominating the news and probably more important than anything we're going to talk about today. But my point is, there's a 4-year term of presidency where a lot of bills get passed and where a lot of lives are affected, where tax codes are changed, where healthcare systems are changed, where rights are gained and lost, as we've seen in the last presidency. To act like these votes are the same is so infuriating, and I genuinely don't know how to respond to these people without being extremely unkind. And if people want to call in and try to make a case, I would love to hear it. I have not heard anyone make a case that's compelling. In my view, voting isn't about picking the person who represents your moral systems the best. It is purely a strategy. You have a world that you want to attain, right? Through which path is it the most accessible? Because Biden has passed actually a lot of bipartisan legislation throughout his term that has been very impressive to me, considering what I expected of him, which was virtually nothing.
Not much, yeah.
Yeah. In my view, I think it is an unbelievably offensive thing to pretend that these votes are interchangeable. And this might just be a terminally online thing that no serious voter is actually considering, and most serious voters see quite obvious differences between the, 90 plus count indicted president who's, been sat in the pulpit next to the judge and bullied over his inability to keep his mouth shut in the face of a gag order, and the president who's trying to do things. But maybe other people don't. So I don't know. Lux, what do you think? And do you have thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can see a lot of ways in which people were expecting things to change under the Biden presidency, and they just haven't really meaningfully changed. Like, our policies with detain people at the border, the sending money to Israel stuff, a lot of the big, non-social issues are kind of up for grabs. So I don't know. It's it's frustrating for people, and I get that. So I can see why they're saying it. And so I live in Kansas. My vote for president doesn't matter. I think that people should still turn out to vote in general, because there's obviously going to be stuff on the local level that you are going to still be able to affect, like your state legislators, all that kind of junk. So I can't say, as someone who lives in Kansas, I'm not excited to vote for Biden, and I don't know that I will. Maybe I just won't this time, because I kind of have, I guess, a little bit more flexibility to make that statement, because there's no chance. Kansas is very gerrymandered, so there's no chance, even though we have a pretty high population of Democratic cities, we're not at risk of turning purple. If we were at risk of turning purple, I would say, yes, let's go. But no, it's just not the case. So otherwise, I would say, voting for Biden in a swing state, you should probably still try to do that, because the likelihood that Biden is going to greenlight, more active persecution of, like trans people, for example, is like the big thing that Republicans are going to continue pursuing and cracking down on. You know, we can at the very minimum protect people here who are subject to local oppression in that way. Like, obviously, the global situation is not going to be different whether you pick a Democrat or a Republican, but at least domestically, they do have pretty drastically different policies. So I think that for that reason, you should definitely still suck it up and vote for Biden. But, you know, you don't have to be happy about it and do other things. Voting is not the only thing that you can do. Do other stuff. If you feel bad about voting for a guy that you hate, then do something to change the entire structure of the system. So that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. You don't have to like it. I'm not Biden's biggest fan. You don't see me, waving Biden flags in my house or having a Biden hat on. I'm not a Biden stan, but I recognize that he is quite clearly the best option that we have compared to the far and away GOP frontrunner, which is still somehow Donald Trump. Really, any GOP candidate at this stage would be an absolute nightmare for any queer people domestically and like women domestically. But anyway, I just saw a lot of that kind of sentiment going around lately, and I get where it's coming from. I get the outrage at the, lack of response and lack of empathy for Palestinian people facing the genocide going on in Gaza right now. It is awful, but we cannot pretend that Trump and Biden are the same just because they're both going to defend Israel. I think we have to recognize that our country's relationship to Israel is complex and deep, and probably whoever sitting in the president's seat is going to be doing the same thing, regardless of how they might feel personally about the issue. And I'm not pretending that I know Biden has secret feelings where he's secretly, so pro-Palestinian. I don't know. I'm just saying this issue is more complex, and just because you don't like how Biden responds on an issue does not mean that you can just throw politics to the wind and think it doesn't matter. It still matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we have some callers on the line who I have not plugged into our thing yet still. That is my bad. I'm just going to pull in the first one in order that they came in, so that way I can get that done in the meantime. All right, so first we're going to pull in Mademoiselle and / Monsieur, pronouns she and him. You are
Hello.
live. Hi, what's going on?
Yeah, not much. Just hanging out in the sunny, fresh air of upstate New York. It is a beautiful day. Finally, autumn is arriving. It's a little bit late getting here, but it's here.
Awesome.
Sorry, Katy.
Oh, Katie's not on.
I thought Katy was on. Who's on?
This is Arden and Luxander.
I'm filling in for Katy today.
Cool.
What do you want to talk about
Arden
today?
Hart.
Yes, Arden Hart. That's correct.
Cool. What I wanted to talk about today, kind of a mishmash conversation of a couple of different things. Imagination and growing up, and how our imaginations. It seems to me, out of all the transgender people and intersex and most of that realm, and gender fluid people.
Oh, caller, are you there?
Connection.
Yeah, we're having some connection issues.
Rip. That sounded like I was going to be such a good question.
Am I audible?
There you go. You're back. All right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I cheeked it. I cheeked the mute button.
It happens. Don't worry about it. Do you want to try to repeat that question again?
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about was, I talked to a lot of transgender people and intersex people, and gender fluid people and non-binary, and it runs the gamut. There are a couple of rare, kind of more niche groups within LGBTQ and the whole gamut spectrum. but we all knew that there was something different about us from an early on age. That we are sure of, right?
I think probably it's true for most people, although I will say I think some people probably manage to repress those feelings from such a young age that they probably don't even remember really feeling different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think by and
Mm-hmm.
large it's probably true.
Yeah. And so, like, maybe we can remember trying on, like for example, like I don't identify myself as a is transvestite still a correct term? You'll have to forgive me. I'm not sure.
Transvestites
Guys, like
typically considered more of a slur most of the time nowadays, but there are some people.
Sorry.
No,
So
it's
sorry.
okay. I was actually gonna say there are some people who try to reclaim it and kind of reuse it, and I'm not gonna tell people what labels they can or can't do that to.
Mm-hmm.
But it is kind of typically considered out of use. I mean, it refers to someone who wears a man who wears women's clothes for sexual reasons is typically what the traditional
So
definition was.
do we have a new term for that yet, or no?
Not really. There was kind of an attempt to define a group of trans women that way. It was called autogynephilia, but that was also kind of discredited as a meaningful category of people. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
but I
I
mean,
feel
I'm
like
not.
a related term
Yeah.
might be like crossdresser or
Yeah.
drag might be more commonly used nowadays. Like,
Mm.
I guess drag can be more casual.
As it was even back then, to a
Mhm.
certain degree. Well, that's also another thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to bring up the concept of, like, how we will act. A lot of us remember acting out if we were men, if we were guys or non-cis guys, but had that genitalia, or for the opposite genitalia. We remember dressing up as the opposite sex or the opposite gender identity, and like that stems from imagination to a certain degree. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, kids play. I think all kids probably engage in sort of cross gender play and expression, or most kids. Maybe there are some who live in a highly controlled enough environment. But I remember growing up with my cousins when we were, our parents would be starting to go through a garage sale, and all of us would, all the boys would put on a dress, and all the girls would dress up in like the man's clothes, and then we would kind of like just make a thing out of it, and we'd laugh, and then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've heard sometimes of like a trans guy will say, "Oh, I didn't know that I was trans until I was much older, but then in retrospect, every time we played house, I insisted on being the dad." And like, isn't that funny in retrospect? Yeah. So I think the question here is sort of relating back to like imagination a little bit. Is that what you were driving toward?
Right. Yeah. Like, how do you think imagination comes in? And then I wanted to go into imagination a little bit and free will and identity, and like how our imagination forms partly in a way our identities. And then, like, if we're imagining ourselves as a woman or a man, we're gonna start to take maybe a more masculine role or a more feminine role, or maybe if we're masculine, like unless we're non, like, gender fluid or non-binary, so to say.
I mean, yeah, I kind of feel like this is part of why representation is so important, or one of the like we might not explicitly say it this way, but like the ability for a young kid to imagine themselves in a role is like part of why we want there to be more representation. Like I was watching a TikTok thing recently about a dad talking about his little girl being like, she does a lot of sports. She already is an athlete, but she was asking me like, do girls do sports? And because he was watching men's sports all the time, he was like, oh, I didn't realize that she was not seeing women in those roles, and that caused her to not feel confident that she could have that role in the future. And so like, yeah, I do think that like a lot of trans people, in the absence of knowledge of other trans people, do kind of go through a long period of time of just kind of feeling weird. Like for some kids, it's super clear. They're like, I'm gonna grow up and be a boy, even though I was assigned girl and they told me that. And like for a lot of other people, it's just like they just kind of feel like crap. And then after a period of
Mhm.
time, you come in contact with trans people and you're like, oh, that's what this horrible depression has been for this entire time.
Right.
So yeah, like the ability to
Right.
envision, I would maybe not say imagine, but the ability to envision a future that looks like whatever and includes you in it, I think is probably pretty important for any self-actualization.
Yeah. Right. You know, I can tell you paid attention in sociology and anthropology. Yeah, closely.
I am a complete amateur. I'm totally self-taught philosopher, but I'm glad that you enjoyed.
Yeah. But also, I mean, you know, like I remember that in the Iliad and the Odyssey, the one story where Zeus, where this person appeared, this mortal appeared before Zeus and Hera, and Hera and Zeus were questioning that person. He started out as a cis man, or a man, and then was turned into a woman by the gods. I think Hera maybe, and they were talking about, well, which does a man have a better orgasm or does a woman? And he said, and like he answered a woman, and then like Hera blinded him for the rest of his life because of it. So like, how much of our gender issues have actually truly been evolving? Have we always had these questions, or like, is there any new level of genderness and gender identity that like we're reaching in this era and 20 modern century that like we've never seen before?
I see. I think you're kind of touching almost on the like Judith Butler gender performance theory kind of stuff, where like so Judith Butler's theories on gender basically posit that the roles that we accept and identify into within gender are entirely ones that were reified and taught to us by our parents that we then adopted and incorporated into our lives. And I think I get the impression from Judith's work that it feels more like that once that is done, it is just like done to you, and that is just it. And like, you know, you can try to affect society so that the next generation maybe can adopt slightly different roles that are like a little bit better for them or whatever, but that it is pretty locked in. And I kind of agree with that. But yeah, I think I don't know that we're necessarily discovering new genders per se. I think humanity has always had the capacity to identify with any way that we do currently. It's just that the ways that we are likely to associate with and to pick are heavily influenced by our culture and the media and the things that we are surrounded with growing up. So, you know, you're going to see trends over time, like women wearing dresses and men, you know, being the hunter-gatherer sort of thing. Like, you're going to see those trends take place over time. But I don't know that anything we're doing with gender is necessarily new. I think it's probably just that for the first time in, you know, modern society, we're not being forced to fall into certain categories. We're actually having the ability to choose, you know, the complexity that's always been there.
If anything, it's a rediscovery post-colonialism. Like we were doing all this kind of stuff before anyway, and then we have had a temporary blip of like repression that I think is, I mean, it's like starting to lift somewhat. There's like less overt persecution in certain countries. But yeah, it's tough. Who knows?
Yeah. You know, and it's not necessarily, it's also because we have more mass media, people are more open about it, and it's not like hush hush under the table kind of thing, brush those cobwebs underneath the rug because that ain't right kind of thing. You know, people, we have the Constitution behind us, and people are in the open streets parading it. You know, I think that's very good. They're owning it. And that's the other one I wanted to talk about, free will and owning who you are. I mean, there are people with body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, not comfortable with their gender, yet they know they want to be a particular gender, yet they're not even comfortable being that gender per se. and how our free do we really have if we don't have any free will, how can we say we're truly comfortable with who we are? How can we own who we are? At the very least, can we do that with any certainty of will whatsoever?
I'm not totally sure I followed exactly how free will plays into this, but also that I think that's because conversations I usually am engaging in on free will are like, does free will even exist? Uh,
Right.
I'm not sure I completely followed that one. So I'm not
I
sure
don't
if I
think we
have.
would know anyway. Like if we did or did not have free will, I don't think that you would know. Or like what do people even mean by that?
Right.
Like you are influenced by
Right.
a bunch of chemicals in your brain. Like so like you can kind of control your thought direction to some extent, but you are also subject to a bunch of like punishment and reward systems. Like I don't know, it's complicated. I don't really know how much of a difference it makes to a gender conversation to because a lot
Well,
of the determinism that
well,
people tend to engage with on this topic is it's like transmedical, right? Like if we're going to
well,
do
what?
something deterministic, unless you're going to go the soul's direction, which we typically don't.
Right.
Right. But what I mean, like as far as where I was going to go with the free will and determinism idea of gender and how it affects our gender roles and identities is like, for example, if on the day or on the morning of the night that both of you were going to be fired, if your parents had Wheaties instead of Fruity Loops, maybe you guys wouldn't have been transgender. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you can engage in hypotheticals. I just don't really find it that interesting, I guess. Um, like
Mm-hmm.
because it's like how many like what made you prefer chocolate over vanilla ice cream? You know what I mean? Like because being trans and being like preferring one thing over another, liking something over another, you know, feeling happy when you're referred to one way and upset when you're referred to another way. Like that's such a complex web of neurodevelopment. Like who knows how much of it happened because of hormone exposure while you were a baby? Who knows how much of it happened
Right.
because you watched Rocky Horror Picture Show when you were way too young or something? I don't know. Like I was really into it when I was a kid, but I think that that's more like I knew what I was rather than it turned me into what I am. But anyway, yeah, it's like, um, you can engage in a hypothetical and, look back on your own past and kind of view it through that lens of what ifs. But like, yeah, I guess I just find it so much more interesting to look at questions, um, about like how you're gonna deal with the world as it is now, as opposed to, I mean, maybe yeah, seeing where things came from can be useful to inform where you're gonna go next. But yeah, I don't know. What is it that makes you think about this, or like what is it that you are trying to solve by teasing out how free will interacts with gender?
Oh man, I just like it's just every like for me like I will look at a subject as a jewel, right, or a finely carved gem, and like I will try and look at it from every possible facet, and then bring another facet into it, another little gem into it, another little subject into it, where you might not think it would fit, but it does in a kind of odd way.
Yeah, I think that it's possible like the people are prone to examining all of the potential causes. Like what is it in my past that could have led me down this path? If you're like in the early stages of kind of figuring out what it is that being trans is for you, um, like I can see that being a question that people might ask themselves of like
Mm.
what is going to happen based on what has happened in the past? Like what brought me to where I am today? Um, and like honestly, I kind of wonder if somewhere in that is like is like an implication of like what went wrong, like where like when did I get set down on this
No,
path
yeah,
to
that's
the dark
always
side?
yeah. that is always, especially the thing with me. I'm like, what went wrong with me? I'm never gonna
Yeah.
find a. I'm polyamorous. I'm gay in the romantic way, meaning I'm asexual when it comes to guys. I'm a little bit of a pan romantic asexual or gray asexual, hetero flexible, LG somewhere on the LGBTQ queer scale as well. I'm the oddest. I feel like I'm the oddest color of the rainbow, sweetheart.
Yeah. Well, Mademoiselle, I appreciate the speculation of, where we come from and free will and all that stuff. I'm not sure we really have much more to offer on this topic, and we do have other callers I would like to get to. So I think we're going to move on and take those
Thanks for
callers.
taking my call, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a nice one.
Toodles.
All right. Real quick before we move on to the other calls, I want to remind you guys that while Transatlantic is the best show on this network, it is not the only show. And I am contractually obligated, not really, there's no contract, but I am obligated to tell you guys about the other shows on this network. So Sunday at 2 p.m. is going to be The Sunday Show with Matt Dillahunty and Jimmy Snow. That is, of course, where you can get your theist debates, the classics that we do here on the Skeptic Network. On Monday is going to be Shannon Q and Apologia. I'm sure there will be some discussions about the validity of coffee tables there that night on Skep Talk. That's 6 p.m. on Monday night. Tuesday on Dying Out Loud, Dave Warnock is going to have Jimmy Snow on. And then this coming Wednesday, which is November 1st, my birthday month, finally, Matt is going to have Dr. Aron Adair on, which is going to be awesome. So, if you've been somebody who maybe is into the sort of quantum woo stuff and you've been wanting to call Matt, but Matt doesn't necessarily have that physics specialty, that is going to be a great night to call in and bring those topics. And then we do not have our availability sorted out for next month, but I will be here next week, regardless of who I'm with. So there you go. That is your week of shows coming up on the line. But with that, we're going to take Ricky in Florida. Ricky, return caller. I hear some feedback. Hopefully that can get muted right away. But Ricky, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Yeah. Hey. So, thanks for the call. To begin with is that I'm wondering when it actually comes to the trans debate, the trans rights. I live in Florida, so I'm constantly seeing new laws that are aimed against trans people and against trans minors. I'm sure you can go much farther than the laws in my own state than I can. And but when I'm seeing the discussion here, I see that that when the subject of groomers and the sexualization of children comes up, that the standard go-to response are the actual groomers and sexualization that goes on within religious or conservative community. And like I've even seen a discussion that lists to a long list of pastors or a long list of Republican congressmen and local leadership. But isn't that kind of weak when it comes to some actual instances within the trans and LGBT community?
I mean, I think that the main thing is that these are substantiated cases, right?
Right.
Like, the difference is that there are just accusations of, I feel like this drag queen was being weird around my kids, whereas we have numerous, we've gone to court, people have gotten jail time for harming children, and the people who are generally doing that are these men in positions of power, such as in the church or in the Scouts or something like that. The reason why that point comes up is because an accusation is being made with no evidence. The accusation of grooming against trans people is being made with no evidence. And the claims that people are making, okay, well, if there was harm done to a child, we have a system and people do get prosecuted in that system. So where is the evidence for this accusation? It's a very like serious accusation. It's like a life-destroying accusation. Even if like, so if you get accused of grooming a child and then the news starts posting about you, like that's what's going to turn up in the future when you try to apply for a job. So we need to be like pretty clear on our due diligence and like not make accusations without evidence. So do you take issue with the idea that like one side is able to substantiate their claims and the other side isn't?
No, I don't take any issue at all.
So then why would you say that it's a weak response? It seems to me to be an incredibly effective response to point out that one side has substantiated their claims and the other hasn't.
It's not a problem for no, it's not a problem for me at all. And when you're talking about actually bringing,
but Ricky, wait,
evidence of
Ricky, wait,
What's
though.
up?
But I asked you a question. You called in and you said it's a weak response to point out religious abuse that is documented when people are calling out LGBTQ people for being groomers. And Luxander just explained why it's actually not a weak response. So I want you to explain, why do you think that's a weak response?
Oh, gotcha. Because it's a response I've used, and yet and I feel that if I ignore some actual wrongdoing, some actual instances that's good substantiation, then I'm engaging in a whataboutism. Okay,
don't do that then.
When
right?
learning about how to.
So just don't do that then, right? If somebody has abused someone and they can substantiate that claim, say, yeah, that person is demonstrably abusing children, deserves prison time, and deserves to be, attacked, not physically, but perhaps, verbally from their community for being a child abuser. And until such time that you can demonstrate that a person or a group of people, because mind you, that's another difference we're talking about here when people are calling out documented cases of religious individuals committing abuse, but meanwhile, the conservative right is saying the entire group of LGBT people are child abusers. Those are very, very different things. It's not whataboutism if you are saying, I think all abuse of children is wrong, and I'm going to call it out where I see it, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the LGBT community, or whether it's in, my personal family. It is bad, no matter where it happens. It is wrong. But I also won't stand for associating an entire group of people who are already systemically discriminated against with child abuse, because there's no evidence for that.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's my question to you, Ricky, is like, understanding. Hold on 1 second. Understanding that there is generally no evidence when these accusations are made, and seeing how we are experiencing broader and broader accusations of grooming. Like, literally, if you look kind of like you might be a non-binary person because you have colored hair and certain shape of glasses, and you teach about like what gender identity means in an elementary setting, people will call you a groomer. Like, the fact that you're telling people, that you're telling children that being trans is normal and okay is considered grooming. Do you understand why we would take issue with like this philosophical framework where like the idea that trans people exist is not okay to tell children because that's grooming them somehow into the lifestyle, when like we understand grooming to be a systematic tactic of getting to know one child and their families so that you can sexually or otherwise exploit them. Like, when you're making this accusation, like, queer people do nothing. We literally just exist, and then a child walks in the room and we're grooming them, Like, that is the level that we're at with how flimsy, like, people just throw this word around just constantly. So, like, can you see why that's an issue compared to the actual substantiated sexual abuse amongst religious groups.
And that's already the issue the issue I do take. And you actually just made me have a small epiphany that it's all like that. The rhetoric isn't just about instances within the trans community being too much. That it really is to blame the entire community, and it's kind of like a subtext that I didn't pick up on. I really thought guessing I'm giving them a little bit more good faith than they really have.
Yeah.
So
there and envisioning it.
I appreciate you having this moment, Ricky, and I have very conflicted feelings over this call and you, and I'm going to be straight up about this because, Ricky, we've talked over the last 2 years, probably 10 plus times, and it's pretty much always gone like this, where you call in with some generic right-wing Fox talking point and saying, but what if they're right? And then we explain why they're very obviously wrong. And you go, oh yeah, okay, I see where you guys are coming from. Thanks. And I want to be able to be a lifeline for you to reality. But also, Ricky, it feels often a little dishonest and like you aren't really taking any effort to think for yourself. And like you are genuinely just assuming because you heard it on the news that it must be true and not taking any time to talk to, and granted, this is an opportunity for you to talk to trans people, I suppose, but you're not taking any real effort to like investigate, is this true on your own? And it makes me worry a little bit about, what your process is like when you encounter this information, because like, I want you to be able to have long-term success, right? Like Takis isn't going to be forever. It might be for a long time, but it's not going to be forever. I'm not going to be hosting it forever, but you are going to be consuming news until the day you die. So I really would like it for you, Ricky, if you were able to encounter news and to be able to suss out for yourself, how realistic is this? Am I buying into something? And you really got to take into consideration these things when we're talking about individuals who are credibly accused of sexual assault, and they're accusing an entire group of sexual impropriety on no basis whatsoever. Like, I didn't have to even hear the specific news thing you were talking about to be able to break that down, because it was that obvious to me. And I'm not trying to make you feel stupid, but you really need to be able to suss this stuff out yourself. And I don't know what to do, about what resources to give you. Do you watch the other shows on this network about like critical thinking and skepticism?
Sunday show from time to time, and Wednesday show. There's great clips, yeah.
Okay. You should also try watching the Skep Talk on Monday if you can. Or watch the playback if you work on Mondays or something. They have lots of different guests talking about skepticism from a lot of different fields. And I think that kind of thing could be valuable for you to start thinking about how to apply skepticism, not just to religion, not just to trans issues, but how to apply skepticism in your life to everything. Because I realize the environment you're in. Trust me, my parents live in Florida. I get it. Their friends are surrounded by it all the time. And even though their friends think I'm great, they still think awful things about trans people in general. I'm just an exception or one of the good ones or something because I'm their friend's kid. It's hard to avoid in your area, and I really do respect that. But I also think you have to bear some of the responsibility for the news you're consuming and for how quick you are to digest it and regurgitate it, right? Like, I really hope you have a diverse set of news that you're getting, because it really doesn't sound like it to me based on the calls we've had with you.
I will say, though, it does, it is like you start to notice the patterns of the ways in which people are manipulative. And it can be kind of jarring initially when you start to realize like, oh, this is the narrative that's being crafted and sold to me. Like, this is the narrative that Fox News is creating or whatever. Like, whoever it is that you're watching that are making these claims. Because, yeah, I think that you might have even called in another time that I was here. And it goes kind of the same way.
It's much less about the new. It's much less about the news because, like, I at this point, I get it from a variety of sources, and I'm not even looking that much at like specific news pieces that come to me about what's going on in the trans or the LGBT community, and
Sure.
it's essentially hearsay from some angry neighbors or angry neighbors and friends and family members that
Right.
come out of that I feel come out of like nowhere because I guess I come here because, for example, it's all like, okay, what is this groomer rhetoric? What is this what is let me backtrack a bit. What do trans people want? What rights do they have? What rights do they not have? What rights are being taken away? And in Florida, Ron DeSantis, I've seen, has taken away so many rights. And then it's let's say I focus my time on one of the new laws, like the one that banned gender affirming that was banning gender affirming care. Focus on that, and then I get a thing. Oh well, there's these weirdos that like to talk to kids, and then and even something that's not a news, that there's a sport that I go to, Taekwondo or whatever, where I hear young kids that there's like a culture shift in Central Florida, but mind you, that within schools these athletic jock types are kind of becoming the outcasts, while the kids who are more that are either LGBT, non-binary, or trans, that's what's becoming trendy. And it's all like, well, when you're fighting for their rights, and there's the suppression of their rights, but then these kids are going hog wild on that, and it's all like what? It's all like, wow, that just that's not even any talking point. That's that's just the input I'm receiving,
Sure.
and there's not one bit of Fox News involved there.
Well, I will say then, if you're mostly getting sort of these talking points, you're just hearing them from random people, it's worth remembering that random people believe a lot of weird shit, and they always have, Ricky. I mean, some people believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, even though all of the available evidence suggests that is so obviously not true. Some people think that evolution isn't true, even though evolution is an observed fact about reality. The theory of natural selection is the best way to describe the diversity of life on Earth, but evolution is an observed fact. Like, people believe a lot of weird shit, but like, if, my uncle or my neighbor comes out and tells me, well, the vaccine is fake and evolution's not real either, you know what I do with that information, Ricky? I toss it in the garbage, because what the fuck does my uncle or the neighbor know when all of the science and all of the available experts on this field have come to a very clear conclusion, right? Just because some dude believes it doesn't mean it's worth considering or digesting. It doesn't mean it's worth throwing away either necessarily, but you can't just like onboard the things you hear. And it is worth, considering like, oh, this is what the culture is around me is kind of saying, and what does that mean? And should I be, putting my efforts in activism or in some way because the culture is so bad? Those things are fine to inform you that way, but you shouldn't be considering just because you heard a thing from a dude that it is like a meaningful idea in society or that it holds truth necessarily. Like,
I kind of wonder if it's more that like you can tell that something is wrong with what's being said, but you're not sure what it is or how to respond. Maybe like, because if people around you are saying like, okay, these are groomers happening, blah blah blah, and then like you see people arguing back against that, and like you look into it and you're like, okay, well, people are mostly just firing back about how actually pastors are the ones doing it. Like that doesn't really address the fundamental like thing that's happening, which is that they're being manipulated into believing something is true about a whole group if you can point to even one example of a person in that group doing that harmful thing. But yeah, so I think that maybe that like familiarizing yourself with those kind of discussions might be like something that you could do. Like obviously calling into the show, like you having found this resource is useful for sure because you're able to like have those conversations. There are people who make content about this stuff. Like I don't, toot my own horn or whatever, but like my channel, the main thing that we do most of the time lately is like talk about the laws, talk about the rhetoric, discuss what's wrong with it. I sometimes feel like I'm being kind of repetitive because we go over the same type of content. But so, if you're interested in like kind of familiarizing yourself more with like why do people say this about trans people, or like why is this wrong to say about trans people? There's definitely a lot of pre-prepared content to watch where people have gone in on detail and discussed it before. Although I am glad that we are able to answer your questions, and that like I'm glad that you have these moments where you're like, oh, I totally get why this thing that I heard is wrong. I think that there is like this assumption that people who are calling in are representing their actual beliefs. So I think that there's like this moment where you come on and you present your idea and we feel like, oh God, you're being transphobic again. But it's just you're trying to figure out how to answer something that you heard in your life, maybe.
Oh, no, definitely. And no, but also but it's also, let's say that that I guess, well, some people will come, I guess you could say some random people will come and rage. That will be some story of some news story that they heard about. I don't know, a transgender, like a transgender teen being all mean. And this is just like one example, but but another. Yeah, I just told you about that incident. Of, by the way, it was actually a teenage kid that was exasperated about how the culture around him has changed. It's all like, I feel like such an outcast because I'm straight and I like sports and I'm okay with that. But again, this is just like one experience, and I'm well out of high school, and thank God for that. And but also like one final point. I was like, I was looking at like, I was looking at some groomer accusations and see, okay, what do you have any specific ones? And then it's all like, okay, this I have to admit was wrong. One of which was, some Canadian teacher, a Kayla Lemieux, that came to her high school with these gigantic prosthetic Z-sized breasts, as if to make some.
I'm pretty sure that was a troll. I'm pretty sure that was a man dressing like that on purpose.
Yeah, I think the actual trans identity of that person is not confirmed one way or another. I think the stuff Lux offered you is great in terms of like, if you want to have like these discussions and have retorts to the things people say, I think that is a good resource to like sort of go. But I think also, Ricky, consider maybe trying to find conversational outs where you are just basically disregarding what that person is saying and being like, yeah, I'm not interested in this conversation. Or like, just ways to disengage where it's like, you don't have to have a response cooked up to this person. You don't have to be ready for the trans debate with the random dude at your Taekwondo class who like has a huge hate boner for trans people. Like, you can just say, no, I'm not interested in that conversation because you clearly have like some weird obsession here and it's like not my job to defend trans rights all day. But that's okay too. I appreciate that you kind of want to know the truth about it. And also knowing your motivation makes me feel less frustrated with your calls. So I appreciate kind of understanding more where you're coming from. But
and another thing that you're saying that what you're saying is that it's one thing I've noticed that I've seen in the line that Matt Dillahunty doesn't engage at all with conspiracy, like at all, and it's all like that's a very healthy way to take on different discussions, to take on the world, and it's all like, I guess, to just disregard people saying and just mentally throw it into garbage.
yeah, I mean, like, you don't want to get trapped, obviously, in just, never observing the things people are saying. But if somebody is really not an expert in a field and they're saying something that sounds a little bit politically charged to you, I think you could pretty safely say, I'm going to reserve judgment until I get this from a reliable source. I think that is a thing you are totally entitled to do, and to just not really worry what individuals on a day-to-day basis come up with. You don't have to save the world. You don't have to change people's mind, and you don't have to be myth busting in your day-to-day life. It's cool when people are able to do that, for sure. But I don't think it's everyone's skill set or responsibility. And I think sometimes it's better to just know how to say, I don't necessarily know what the response is to this person, but I know what they're saying is so politically charged and probably baked in some propaganda and misinformation, and I'm just not even going to engage with this person. Just find a way to be like, I'm not engaging with you on this topic. I'm not interested. That's a perfectly acceptable way to go about your life.
Okay. I've got nothing else, and thank you for the call.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricky. I appreciate it.
Later.
Have a nice day.
I do want to say before we move on to the next person that someone in the chat was like, oh, there's no way that this is just him running into these things in the wild. He calls in too often for that. And I'm like, I actually do think that Ricky and the fact that he calls in with these examples that he's hearing interpersonally kind of is an indication of how much in certain parts of the country this is being talked about. Like, so I don't want to completely, I guess, disregard him as a useful data point in that, like, yeah, he's probably not watching Fox News, but there's probably only 1 or 2 steps removed from Fox News with all these people talking to him. So it's like, it is kind of indicative of where things are at on the ground in Florida. Because when you think, oh, these issues don't matter to like the average Republican. And so we are seeing more and more that these issues are being talked about more on the ground, and that there potentially is more room for them to gain like grassroots support for these ideas, which have up until this point been mostly unpopular with the base. But that's all. I just wanted to share those thoughts real quick.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. I did come in kind of hard on Ricky because he's called in so many times, and I haven't really gotten that perception from him that he's more responding to people in his community. It genuinely, I mean, at one point, I think he quite literally said that he watched Ben Shapiro and was like, you kind of got a point, and then brought it to us, and I was like, he doesn't have a point, Ricky.
Maybe he's saying, I don't go watching the news for this. Maybe he's saying the algorithm is serving this up to me. Like, sure. Maybe it's like people on Facebook are sharing this stuff, or something along those lines. It might not always be in-person interactions, but it's still his interpersonal interactions.
Yeah, and I realize also we frame the show as a place where you can call to ask those kinds of questions, and I did kind of come down on Ricky for asking those questions. Part of the reason is because you have to wonder at a certain point. Ricky's been calling since like near the beginning of Takis. I mean, like I think for probably 2 years, Ricky has been calling in. You have to wonder at a certain point when you're still digesting those lines so easily.
Mm-hmm.
Is this person honestly calling in for information, or do they just kind of want to talk? Because there are some people who just kind of want to get on the line and just talk to the hosts. That is a normal thing that we see all the time. So it's kind of hard to gauge his motivation, but he's usually a decent person to talk to, so I'm not trying to be too rough on Ricky. But anyway, we have 5 more calls on the line. I did close the lines because it is already 3:00. I didn't realize the last 2 calls we took for like 20 minutes. So we're going to try not to spend too much time on any of the rest of these calls because I would like to get to all of them. but I want to pull in Dylan. They've been waiting on the line for far too long. Dylan, he, they, also in Florida. Dylan, what's up? This is also our mod, Dylan.
Hello. I sort of just wanted to call because I know we've kind of talked a little bit back and forth in chat about discussing its pronouns.
Yeah.
And sort of, because we had a caller not too long ago, the call screener mentioned it because they thought I was them. But sort of just wanted to kind of have a different perspective about how I am very conscious of how it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and because of that, I don't typically even enforce that. I just silently, if you go to like my Twitter or even my YouTube page, I'll have it as an option there, but I just don't in my real life, or even when I called in today, because it was a different screener, I didn't really mention it just because I'm just so hyper aware that it makes people uncomfortable that I just don't feel I don't know, it's like sacrificing a little bit of that comfortability for myself to make others comfortable. And that's definitely have to do with my personality, just in general. It's just how I interact with other people, is to make sure others are comfortable, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, but it also gives me complex feelings because as the resident uncomfortable with it because of my relationship to how that word was used with me historically, I also don't necessarily think that the healthiest response for you or anyone who identifies with it, uses it's as a pronoun, is to completely stifle that away for the comfort of other people. This is kind of what a lot of the neopronoun conversations in the past few weeks have been really centered around, which is that I think people are entitled to feel weird about the pronouns that they're hearing if they're not used to hearing them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they get to avoid necessarily using them or to not have to try to face that discomfort, right? Like, I appreciate when people offer they, them as an out. So while I'm having the internal struggle of like punching myself in the face to say it, if it doesn't get out in time, I can say they and feel like the conversation didn't feel too awkward. But also, that is just kind of something that me and other people who aren't used to that using that pronoun are just going to have to get over, right? Because like language does evolve over time, but also it has to be pushed there. So I don't know. I have complex feelings about that. Like, I appreciate that sentiment on one end, but at the other end, I don't necessarily like that you are stifling your authenticity for other people's comfort, because I feel like that's not right either.
Yeah. Like, I want to jump in because I primarily use its pronouns online now. Like, if I'm in person, I'll pretty much just say they, them. Or if like certain crowds, I don't bother to correct people, whatever, don't care. I'm beyond it at this point, which is part of why I use its pronouns, because it's not like I'm any all in the sense that none of them bother me, but it is any all in the sense that I'm done having this conversation. But yeah, like, I completely understand I understand people having some discomfort with the term. Like, I'm sure that you might also have discomfort with people reclaiming slurs, like, in the same way, because it is used in that kind of dehumanizing way. And, like, I still recognize that the term it can be used in this dehumanizing way. Queer can still be used in a dehumanizing way. There's a difference between saying, yes, my queer studies professor, versus you watch a video of a pastor from that one church going like, and those queers, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, haha, I'm in danger. Like, you can tell the difference. And so it's kind of the same with it. It's, like there's like a reclaiming aspect, and there's times when people are using it harmfully. And so I get that. And I do think that people are going to use like less conventional ways of expressing themselves if they feel like the current framework is not working for whatever reason. Like, I have my reasons for preferring its pronouns. And, I'm glad that people who have that discomfort are able to recognize that that is like something that is coming from their trauma and isn't necessarily like, because what you're doing is like sort of it's like your authenticity. It's not just your comfort that you're sacrificing, it's your authenticity if you feel like you have to hide part of yourself. And so it's like, it doesn't matter what thing that is, it's always going to feel painful. Like if you have to suppress your they them pronouns around your family who are going to call you by whatever you grew up with, like that's a painful situation. And like having to suppress your like specific like nuanced gender identity in trans spaces, like where it feels like you should be able to talk about that. Like I know that it has been an issue in the past, and y'all have talked about its pronouns here, and I don't even like mention that my pronouns are it's when I come on this show. I think that Jimmy like knows that my pronouns have historically been they them and lists them as such when he's producing the show or whatever. And I just haven't corrected him because it's like, yeah, they is still like acceptable, but it is the preferred pronoun. And so it does kind of suck that we do feel this need, even in these trans spaces, to like still hold parts of ourselves back. Like, I think that's what feels so bad about it.
Yeah.
I think also just whenever you have multiple sets of pronouns, there's almost a tier list of, at least for me, is like, as long as it's not she, I feel like I'd be okay.
Right.
Because for the majority of it, like, even though I am demi-boy, which is a masculine type of non-binary, like, I still do like they. I still do like a neutral set of pronouns. But, and I've realized that I get giddy when somebody even uses they more often than he. Just noticing that, I feel, because I feel like for a lot of people in my daily life that do respect my identity, they don't know that I'm non-binary in general. They just assume that I'm a trans man, and I'm not man. I don't like the gender of man as myself. It's more, I will say man as a joke. I do like doing that if it's funny, but not necessarily, that's not really the actual gender that I am. It's masculine, just not man.
Isn't
But
that funny though?
honestly,
Like the
as long as they
layers
don't
of
say
self.
she.
Like you'll be at work and you'll be like, I'll pretend to be a trans man at work, or I'll pretend to be a man at work.
Mhm.
And then you go, and then you're hanging out with your friends and you're like, okay, I'll be non-binary with these people. And then you go online and you're like, okay, I'll be xenogender with these people. Like, but you have to like
Mhm.
compartmentalize it. It's funny like that.
Just trying to exist in a space where it's like, this is about as me as I can be with other people, but that's also for most aspects of other things that exist in my life, just being autistic and having a different mask for different spaces and things.
Yeah, like to some extent it's normal, but like having to compartmentalize your gender obviously like feels worse than other things. Like having to pretend to be something in order to access medical care or to be safe in the bathroom, like obviously it's not a good time in any case having to suppress that. And like I hope that we can have more conversations about like, and I think that people want to understand, like, what is it about its pronouns that you prefer? Like, why are you okay with being called this thing that has historically been harmful to me, for example? Like, I mean, but I could say the same thing about she, her pronouns. I'm like, why do you want to be called that? Like, I personally hated it. I really had a bad time with it. People weaponized it against me. And I know that there are people who have even worse trauma, like, you know, being forced to cut their hair or something, like, and having like, you're supposed to be a this or you're supposed to be a that. And like, so a lot of trans people have this relationship even with binary pronouns. And maybe, an even better example is meeting a trans person who has your dead name. It's like, you can't deny them that affirmation, even if it makes you uncomfortable to even be around your dead name.
That's very weird because my dead name is a rare name. So even coming across, I've met more dogs with my dead name than I have people, which I think is
mine
kind of
isn't
funny,
super common, but yeah, it's jarring when it happens.
I will say that that's an interesting point because I definitely remember, I don't experience that now. I feel like I have sufficiently gotten far enough away from my dead name where I don't have the same reaction to it. But for the first like 3 years or so, there was definitely a period where I was like, I don't even want to associate with somebody who has, like, I don't want to be friends with you. Like, even if you're a really cool person, sorry, we can't be friends. Like, you just
Right.
unfortunately had my dead name. So, but that is something, and I mean, and that's kind of what I was trying to advocate for too in the last few conversations we've had about this, where, you know, I may have my personal trauma history with its pronouns, and it is like genuinely physically difficult for me to use to make this utter the sound. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it, and that doesn't mean that I won't get over it in time and stop having such a strong trauma association when when I eventually train my neurons to realize, hey, I'm not in high school. Nobody's threatening to kill me while saying that. So it's like the reaction that I'm having is disproportionate to like the actual situation that I'm in. And I think that's why I just was trying to have the conversation of like, I think it's totally fine and reasonable for you. I see this so often, people having this strong negative reaction towards neopronouns and its pronouns and the like. And I think it's fine for you to have that emotional reaction to it. It's just, you have to check that emotional reaction at the door and recognize, where that place is. And I do appreciate when people, sort of have the tier list. Because there's also some neopronouns that I don't even know like how to use. We had a caller on, I think it was last Monday or something, who had a set of neopronouns, and I was like, I genuinely don't know what the possessive pronoun for this person is. Like, I think it would be one of these two, but I don't know exactly how I would use it in speech. But that doesn't mean that we didn't try, and we had to ban, like, I think Dylan, you were there that night. We had to ban like 5 people from chat because they were just like insisting on not using this person's pronouns. And it was like, look, you cannot get it, but that doesn't mean you get to just disregard, right? Like those are very places to be coming at this from. So
after a while, I think it's just on mobile, but I'm able to time people out for longer than just 5 minutes, at least now. So just been able to utilize that a little bit for that instance. Just please come back like after the call if this is such an issue.
Yeah.
And
all right, well,
one thing is I find it a little weird is how just I'm okay with queer and other people being semi-uncomfortable with queer than I am with it is. In an odd sense. Because if I can't really describe myself in my niche terms, demi-boy, demisexual, all that, but I'll just say I'm just queer. And I feel like that is more encompassing and more, I don't know. I think it's just because it's more accepted now than, well, it's always really been reclaimed since for a long while.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It's good shorthand.
Yeah, I think it's so commonly in use now too that it's you don't really have to do a lot of explaining necessarily. People are like, oh yeah, you fall under this broad umbrella. Like, I get it. You're not straight or cisgender. Yeah. Well, Dylan, I appreciate the call. We do have 4 other calls that I want to make sure we get to everyone. Yeah. So I'm going to let you go, but thank you for calling in, and I appreciate you bringing the topic back up. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Bye.
Later.
Oh, also my mic is falling because this thing doesn't tighten ever enough.
Oh, God. Yeah, boom arms are really just tricky every time.
Well, this is a hand-me-down too. So I know my setup's going to change soon because Jimmy's reclaiming the Rodecaster Pro 2 that he originally got for my production PC. We're changing the system, so I don't need this one anymore. But this is a hand-me-down from Matt that is got this just like ancient, I love you, this ancient knob that just does not turn well anymore, so it doesn't hold up. But all right, let's get through these calls. We have so many. I'm going to, let's take this caller. We're going to take John in California. John wants to talk about voting Democrat versus Republican and the effect that has on trans rights. John, you are live on the line. Hit us with it.
Hey, how's it going? When I tuned in, I saw the pop-up like, who should you vote for? And then I think I heard Luxander expressing the sentiment of, you can vote in a safe state. make a protest vote. I'm not sure if that was your argument or not. I didn't hear your full argument. I came in right as you were making it. But I want to sort of push back and say that the idea of a protest vote in a safe state is how states become purple and then become red. I feel like sex issues have been at the forefront of countries falling into fascism. I mean, look at the Sex Institute in Germany. Look at look at all the authoritarian and fascist states currently. They are all cracking down miserably on LGBT rights. If you care at all, in my opinion, about LGBT rights, vote blue. And if you want a protest vote, do it in the primary, not in the general.
So I just want to clarify, what I meant was I live in Kansas, and it's going to go red no matter what I do. And so I just feel like it doesn't matter. Like, my vote doesn't matter anyway. If I vote for Biden, it doesn't matter. If I don't vote for Biden, it doesn't matter. So, like, if I'm disgusted enough by him and I'm annoyed enough by this system and the fact that I feel like a hostage, that I am forced to vote for Biden, like, I don't have to. I am actually not obligated to, as someone who lives in a red state, I don't think. But I will agree with you. If you live in a blue state that you feel is safe, they get gerrymandered. All like that, weird shit happens in blue states. So yeah, I'm not gonna say. I would definitely not say if you are in a blue state, then you should assume that it's safe and it's gonna go to Biden. But I'll say if you live in a red state and you want to go in and vote for everything local and then just skip the presidential part, or if you want to write in Harambe, I think that's perfectly acceptable.
But then how would a red state ever turn blue if that's the case?
I mean, I'm not really talking about a long-term political strategy. I'm saying, like, if you look at Kansas now and how gerrymandered it is, like, the simple fact that we managed to, when we have a popular vote issue, we managed to get Democratic governors. It's happened several times in my lifetime. And yet all of our representation is going red, like our urban districts get redistricted in a way that they get lumped in with a lot of rural area. And so they take the teeth out of what used to be a blue district. I'm just saying, like, this election season, I don't think if you live in Kansas or a similarly gerrymandered state that goes deep red every time, I just don't think that you should feel obligated to vote for Biden. And obviously in the primary, do whatever you want to do. Like, vote in the Green Party candidate if you want to. Like, I don't care at the primary. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like it's kind of an abusive dynamic, the expectation that I continue voting for Biden, who is, giving trans people the high five as they descend into the ocean. It's just, I just am kind of disgusted by the idea that I am expected to participate. And that, like, and it's like almost embarrassing. It's almost like laughable that I would vote for Biden in a state that's going to 100% go red. I don't know. It just feels bad at a certain point. So I'm not saying that it's a long-term strategy, but also I don't think that this country is going to be around for much longer. So
I don't know what the specific dynamics in Kansas are either, but I know, like, in Texas, so, like, we've been red for quite a while, but there have been, in the last few years, a lot of really close calls. And so I feel like voting blue in Texas is actually a really powerful, radical act of activism here, even for the candidates we can't elect. But also, we did acknowledge that the local candidates are still extremely important to vote blue for. I think when it comes to, any of your local, representative seats, or your senator, or any of the, like, your mayoral seats or anything like that that's up for grabs in an election, regardless of where you live, blue, no matter who, is important. I think it gets people out to vote without making them feel like they have to necessarily read through every single politician's detailed list. You might have something like in Texas, we have, I forget what the paper is, but it will literally list, like, if you're a Democrat, here's who you should vote for and here's why. And it'll give you a summation of their policies. So I kind of always know what I'm voting for when I'm going into a vote. But generally speaking, in red states, I think if people just vote blue on every D that they see on their ticket, I think that's a viable way to vote. I hear what you're saying, John. Like, I agree it's good to, push states towards blue if we can, and that, you know, the only way you get them purple is if people are voting blue. But I also do see where Luxander's coming from, and that of all the people who could ostensibly not vote for Joe Biden and really not be causing harm, it is probably someone in a state like Kansas. But I also,
I'm familiar with like the fact that it's heavily gerrymandered here as well. Like, I've been here for a long time. I'm familiar with my state. We challenged the heavily gerrymandered districts, and our state Supreme Court said, LOL, they're fine. And also the redistricting doesn't happen for 10 years. So I know that I'm stuck in a 10-year long, heavily gerrymandered state where none of this matters. So yeah, I mean, I will try to vote for people locally who are going to fuck the gerrymandering, but yeah, I just don't think that it's as simple as people think, like that always voting blue is always going to be the right thing to do, because like, yeah, that's how they continue slipping further and further right. And people who are saying like, oh well, things are never going to get better if you think that way, or if you don't vote. It's like, well, I mean, respectfully, things don't get better when you vote either. So, I mean, it kind of just seems like what we do or don't do on this, like, it can matter locally. But like, by and large, these systems have been hijacked out of our control. So it's like, it's like a lot of moral weight is given to voting that I just think is disproportionate as to its actual impact. Like, we've been voting for a long time, and still Black people are getting shot dead in the street, and there's no accountability for the police, and et cetera. You can literally go on and on about how many things are still fucked up about America that haven't gotten fixed, despite the fact that we've been using the systems in place to challenge that. Like, obviously,
Sure.
Those are not meaningful challenges if they haven't actually done anything so far. So, I don't know. I'm not going to tell people not to vote. I'm just saying that, like, it's highly inadequate.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But as a principal believer in the concept of democracy and a person who wants to see the Electoral College done away with,
Sure.
I think that if you talk about a country of, I think, we have 330 million people, any one vote is, negligible. But in the participation with democracy, I think it is important that you express that vote towards a positive direction, versus if you're in a red state that has no possibility of going blue to throw it away. I also am I hate Biden, and I do not like him. And I think it was back in 2020, 2019-ish, I had a person that I was Facebook friends with, and they didn't vote for Hillary, and I told them they should have, and then they didn't vote for Biden, and I told them they should have, and then their response was, well, don't you know Biden is a rapist, which I'm not sure that's substantiated. I know there were ostensibly credible allegations, but I don't know if it was substantiated. But then when I told them, like, hey, this is about expressing power, and power in opposition to collective power on the other side. So you can't really say that, oh, I know that this person it kicks puppies, so we have to accept my non-action against the other side that is like building a puppy sausage grinding factory, So and then they blocked me forever, removed me as a friend because I was talking about how to engage in politics in a way that can hopefully in the long term have things improve. And I do empathize with the frustration of things aren't happening fast enough. But if you look at where America is every 100 years, it seems to be getting better. And it's up and down, it's back and forth. But to look at it on like a 10-year time scale or a 20-year time scale, or even the time scale of your life, you're sort of missing the forest through the trees.
I think that you are majorly discounting climate change in that assessment of things being worse than they were 100 years ago. Like on some social issues, sure. And like also the wealth inequality is worse than it has literally ever been, I think, like literally anytime, except for when we were like serfs for actual, like a totally different economic distribution. So like, I think that people's QOL, quality of life, is dramatically going down quickly. I do think that continuing to vote the harm reduction route has led us to where we are in terms of like Roe v. Wade gone. Vote for Democrats. Wow, they're really going to do the job for us, aren't they?
Yeah, but
like climate change,
I feel like I gotta push back. I'm sorry. I feel like at least with regard to specifically Roe v. Wade, that didn't happen because Democrats were in power. That happened because of what Trump did while he was in power. I mean, did Democrats do enough to stop it? No, of course not. And does that frustrate me? Absolutely.
Did they spend 50 years campaigning on the idea that they were going to codify it into legislation, and then they never did, no matter how much of a majority they had?
Oh yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
I'm
saying that
like you.
It was the failure of the fact that they kept campaigning on it. They kept saying we're going to codify Roe, and then they left it vulnerable, and then didn't prevent the stacking of the justices in this instance. Like, it's just like failure after failure after failure. And like, I don't know how you can watch someone who you've hired to do a job. We have hired these people to do a job, and they are not doing it. And you keep like giving them a sticker at the end of the month. Like they keep getting the gold star sticker like they did their job, and they're just not doing their job. And like, how many times is this going to happen before you start firing people? Like, I don't know, man. I just don't know how long you let something happen before you decide to radically do something different.
Well, when you talk about radically doing something different, I agree. But if we look at what has been successful in getting towards that change, I think if you look at Bernie Sanders' campaign and the amount he's managed to just drag the Overton window, kicking and screaming to the left with like literally 2 presidential campaigns, I think we have a clear roadmap through his candidacy about what works. And I think that we should focus on that. Even though he didn't, get the ultimate prize of the presidency, I don't know how much he would have been able to, legitimately get done with the current infrastructure being what it is, and the liberalism being what it is, and, other institutions being what they are. But it was the bully pulpit. It was moving people to the left that he really accomplished more than any other politician in U.S. politics has done before him. And I think that is a clear roadmap for us to follow. Don't you think?
I love Bernie. I mean, I don't know a lot of the details of what he's doing lately. I mean, I follow him on Twitter, so I see him talking about issues relevant to his municipality. But like, yeah, I mean, I think he's great. And I think that I'm super glad that we have like a grand total of 2 human beings in our entire government who represent like any moderately leftist views. Because that's the other thing about the alleged democracy that we live in is like, okay, yeah, well, so apparently, allegedly, so many people are coming to be leftists. And like, yeah, we're seeing tons of folks online talk about, being anti-landlord and wanting to raise the minimum wage and like, class solidarity, we're forming unions, blah, blah, blah. And yet, how does that bear out in the legislative representation? This is like supposed to be a democracy, therefore it is supposed to be somewhat proportionally representative. Like, why then are we accepting a system in which like we don't have any trans representation on the national level? As far as I know, there aren't any out gay people. Yeah, no, there's like that one guy, Santos, the terrible one. He's gay, right?
I think we have there's a rep in Montana who is trans,
but she's a state rep. Like that's not
sure.
At the federal level. Like, yes, we are seeing more local representation. Sure. I'm just saying like state representation is still pretty like why is it still managing to get skewed so hard in this direction? Like, because we preserve this framework of like stuff that isn't even necessarily part of the actual law. Like the way in which we censure judges, or like the way in which we operate certain elections. Like a lot of it is like a flimsy framework that could be analyzed, But like so much of this is like the preservation of the system for the sake of itself. You know, like that's the thing that I get so annoyed about nowadays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, caller.
So I would understand your argument if it was just like a one-party state like we see in other countries. But here in the United States, we have a radical evangelical right where like we had the Republicans just vote unanimously for a person who denies the results of the last election. So right now you have half of the political apparatus in the country is literally just pushing back against anti-democracy, against anti-institutionalism, against anti-enlightenment, right? So until we defeat that, which is the reactionary strain in our political system, which unfortunately they have most of the money, so they have most of the control. Until we're actually able to beat that, I don't know how we can effectively say that, oh, this is just the system perpetuating itself. Like,
is this not the same conversation we've been having since Bush? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, is this not the same kind of way that people talked about Bush? Like, they called him a fascist. He was a warmonger. He got us involved in Iraq. Like, we have to keep voting Democrat to hold the line against these Republicans. Like, go back and listen to George Carlin, okay? All of you people who are young, go back and listen to George Carlin and look at political cartoons from 20 and 30 years ago and ask yourself, what has meaningfully changed? I'll tell you what has meaningfully changed is that more and more money has been siphoned to the top, less and less rights for individuals, more rights being gutted, a virulent attack on human rights. Like we keep saying, oh, we have to hold the line against these radicals, and then they get more radical, and then there's even more reason to vote for Democrats every time. Do you see how this is the Overton window getting pulled to the right? You keep rewarding Democrats, and I'm not saying not to vote or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, do something else other than vote is my ideal situation. But, like, I'm just saying, like, people think that voting is, like, the be-all, end-all, or even that important. And with gerrymandering what it is, and with the Electoral College, like, frankly, my vote for president does not matter. I hate the language of people saying, oh, you're throwing away your vote. It's like, my voice matters, and if I vote for a third party, then that should be like considered important, and like, you know, the freedom that I have to make that consideration within the fact that I live in Kansas is like kind of a privilege, I guess, that I have the option to not vote for Biden, because yeah, it's just not going to make a difference, and I wish that people would try to think of other means. And because like I feel like this conversation we get stuck on the voting conversation, and people criticize folks who are like not into it anymore at the presidential level, specifically with the Electoral College. I'm always going to be in support of local voting, but like people get disillusioned after a period of time. Like people can, if you continue doing the same thing over and over again, you cannot expect people to just be like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this. Everything's fine. Like at a certain point, people are going to get annoyed and be like, no, I don't want to do this.
So before we continue this conversation, I think I'm going to cut it off here only because this conversation has basically nothing to do with trans rights.
That's true. Yeah.
So far. And while I think this conversation is important and I really would like to continue it because I have a lot of thoughts that I've not really gotten to share at all in response to anything anyone has said, I think it's better if we cap this conversation here. John, I thank you for calling in. But I would like to keep the show focused on trans rights. But another time, another place. Thank you very much, John. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about it on my show tonight at 5:30.
Right on. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Let me get this caller's info up. Yeah, man, I have a lot I want to say, but I can't, because then I won't stop talking and it's gonna derail the show, and I don't want us to just spend the entire show talking about electoralism.
We should do a like a drinks night where we do a non-streamed just chat about whatever.
I think that could be interesting. I would like that. But until then, let's bring on a Santino in Ohio.
Patreon only content.
Pronouns are he, they. Santino, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hey, first time caller and a huge fan. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little nervous, and I think I didn't do the best job wording my question to the screener, so I'll try rewording it. Basically, there's like a trend I've noticed, and it, it might
Santino,
just
real
be
quick,
some,
are
it
you
might
in a
not
cathedral?
actually be a trend, but it's something I've observed.
Santino,
Where it seems like
Santino,
people who are caught up,
babe.
Huh?
Sorry, I didn't mean to use like a word like that. I'm just trying to be silly. Are you on like a speakerphone in a cathedral? Because there's a
Are you in a locker room?
crazy echo going on right now.
Funny enough, I was leaving a locker room. Hang on a second.
Called it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, let's try starting over that whole thing again that we're not
how
there.
How does this sound?
So
It's
much
better.
better.
It's better.
So much better.
Okay, no, it's funny. Literally leaving a locker room. So what all did you catch before the sound kind of?
Just start over.
Yeah, just start over.
Just start over.
Oh, okay. So no, I was just saying that it's a bit more of a lighter question, but it's something I've noticed. I don't know if it's an actual phenomenon, or maybe it's just me seeing patterns where they don't exist. But I've noticed that when, and of course it's always going to be public figures, because why would I? It's not like I'm going to know what most private people do in their lives. I've noticed that when public figures kind of get caught in being bigoted in some way, that has nothing to do with trans people, they tend to just kind of try to, bury it under the rug as quickly as possible and never address it again. But for some reason, there seems to be a brain rot when a celebrity is caught with, doing something transphobic. And I didn't know if that's something you two have observed as well. And if so, like, why do you think transphobia seems to be like a uniquely, I don't know if addictive is the right word, but addictive form of, bigotry that just rots away at the brains of celebrities?
Well, I think there's a very multifaceted issue here. One is that celebrities have always been into weird ass shit and it completely enabled because, having wealth and power basically insulates you from any form of meaningful criticism. But I think particularly with regard to transphobia, there is a huge market and industry for transphobic content. And I think celebrities can often get sucked into an audience capture effect where they got such a positive and intense response for a transphobic thing. You've seen it so many times. Somebody will have a viral transphobic post happen, and then being transphobic becomes their career. It's basically audience capture. And I also think there's a cult element to it because the gender critical aspect of like Twitter and Instagram and TikTok is not particularly organized, but they do operate in sort of cultic ways in that they heavily love bomb and reinforce and welcome new people who are expressing publicly transphobic views. In things like, oh wow, this is so brave of you. Thank you for coming forward, defending women and young girls' rights. We need brave soldiers like you. These sort of sentiments, which make a person go, wow, like I really should be speaking up about these things because I didn't realize all these people felt so underrepresented. When really these are people who follow hundreds of accounts doing the same thing, and they do the same response to all of them when they start out. Yeah, I think is a very multi-layered issue, but I think probably at the heart of it is this media like market for anti-trans content that exists, that is huge. I mean, like the Daily Wire exists, and I don't watch any of their content, but it seems like a third of their content, or maybe more, seems to be all centered around trans issues. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a debate, or or watched one of Matt's debates or something. And even though trans issues aren't even relevant to the topic at all, somehow they come up because all of these people are making anti-trans content because that's when they get views. One of somebody who I used to like that used to be in the atheist movement, I think they probably still technically are. I remember during was making some video regarding a trans athlete. It was like their biggest video in months, and then afterwards they made like 15 more videos just like it, shitting on trans people, and like now it became like a part of their content brand. I don't know, it sucks, but it's just a thing that being anti-trans gets you like views.
It's super profitable.
Yeah.
Right. No, that honestly, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad to hear that it's not just me seeing patterns where they don't exist. It at least some other people see it as well. That was really my primary question. There was another question I had thought of while listening to you guys, but obviously I want to respect your time and also be honest. Because this was the question I told the screener, not whatever I thought of during the interim period. So I just wanted to, express my gratitude. Like I said, huge fan, and I really appreciate this particular show on the line. As somebody who kind of recently started grappling with my own identity and kind of observing how a lot of transphobia is just, I don't know, I think it's rotting people's brains who otherwise might have been fairly good allies in any other respect. I know I can never talk about, the feelings and thoughts I've been having with my own family. Luckily, I have a good supportive group of friends, so, I'm not, it's not like I'm hurting too much in that regard. I give you two and every other host, on this show, I give you all a shit ton of credit, and, keep on doing what you do. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Santino. I appreciate it. Have a nice day.
Appreciate you.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Sorry, I had to cough there.
I'm dying. God.
All right, we've got one caller left on the line, and then we can hit these super chats. Super chats are any super chat of $5 or more. We will read out live here, right in front of y'all's faces. But this last caller, which might be a little spicy or might not, I'm not quite sure yet. We've got Richard in Canada. Pronouns are he, him. Richard, you are live on the line. Tell us what you want to talk about today.
Hi. So, well, first off, can I just start with like a little, just a piece of unfortunate news from our side of the border. There's been I apologize if you've already talked about this before on the show, but the premier of Saskatchewan, one of our provinces, has just recently passed, basically an anti-trans kid bill that, sorry, I'm a little hoarse. So basically kids now have to, ask their parents for a permission slip to be called by their preferred pronoun if it differs from their birth certificate.
Right.
In school.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of see this as a, like basically a carbon copy of what they did in, I think it was Tennessee. Not exactly sure which state, but one of those.
Yeah. Real quick to explain to the audience why this is bad. Like this, just take a couple seconds. This is different from asking parents permission to access gender affirming care, right? When we're talking about the right of a kid to have pronouns in school, pretty simple. If a kid can tell their parents, would feel comfortable telling their parents about their pronouns in school, they probably would. And if a kid's not comfortable telling their parents what their pronouns are, there's probably a very valid reason for that. And forcing to out kids to their parents when they don't feel safe to do so themselves is extremely dangerous and so stupid. But anyway, let's get on with what your actual question was, Richard.
Yeah, sure. Right. That's exactly what my thinking was. Luckily, the bill only makes that the case for kids under 16. So there's at least like, if you're 16 and over, you don't have to do that anymore. So that, but that's not much of a silver lining. But anyway, So I was calling like what I told the call screener. I think the question kind of sounds more adversarial than I mean it as. It's just like you know how J.K. Rowling and many of these other turf types have been basically saying that, oh, there's been a massive increase in kids transitioning as early as 5 or whatever. And you coming up with all these studies about how they're more likely to be autistic or, whatever. And they're making it seem as if transgender activists are preying on autistic or otherwise not, neurotypical children and trying to recruit them into transgenderism. And obviously, I don't agree with that point of view, but it's gotten a lot of people thinking, especially people who've never met a trans person, that we can't really tell, for example, if a child really has gender dysphoria or really should transition, and we can't trust them because they barely know how to tie their shoes. So I don't know much about this either, so I was just asking what safeguards there are in place to in the medical system to make sure that we only transition children who we think are likely not to regret it in the future. And if a child has whatever depression or whatever other comorbid condition, like how to separate that from gender dysphoria, and not like recommend transitioning to every kid who walks in who might have gender dysphoria, that sort of thing.
Well, rest assured that the safeguards work, because that 80% figure you hear all the time of 80% of the kids, they desist, they don't even stick with it. That means that actually refers to the total number of people who came to the clinic to be checked out who ended up being determined to not need medical care. So you come in, your parents are like, oh my God, my little kid, they're expressing this gender weirdness, so we want to get them checked out. They're playing with these toys, blah, blah, blah. And then they spend multiple years with a multidisciplinary team. Usually there's some kind of therapy involved. There's, pediatricians involved. They generally have regular contact with the child. They do other probably kinds of safeguarding to ensure that there's not abuse happening. So yeah, I mean, it depends on where you live, of course, but the system is working as intended in the overwhelming majority of cases. And then the other scaremongering number that they'll use, saying oh, almost 100% of the kids that you put on puberty blockers go on hormones later. And it's yeah, again, that's the system working as intended. We didn't even give medical care to the ones who might desist later because the medical prerogative is to be kind of cautious in this. I don't know, most of us don't experience being fast tracked. I mean, as an adult, you can get informed consent care, but for kids, I don't know. Do you know anyone who came out when they were younger, Arden?
Well, I initially started treatment when I was 14 or so.
Okay,
I can't remember
so you were
if it was
pretty
13
young.
or 14. Back then, though, there weren't informed consent clinics back then. We were on the Harry Benjamin standards, which required you to live as the gender you identified as for 2 years before you were able to access treatment. And that was in 2015 that we had that.
And as a minor, you don't get informed consent care for the most part anyway. Even if your parents can consent, they usually don't just give it to you the day that you ask.
Yes, absolutely. Usually with minors, what your care is going to look like is, like Luxander said, you're going to be getting a lot of therapy and pediatricians. The therapist is probably going to recommend that your kid maybe grows out their hair or cuts their hair or paints their nails or does something to express their gender a little differently and sees how it makes them feel. And, if that goes well and they're pretty confident, then maybe they'll consider, based on their age, their point in pubertal development, they might consider puberty blockers or exogenous hormones, like cross-sex hormones. But all of this is going to be according to very well-established medical guidelines based on that kid's point of development. And also, kind of like Luxander was saying, how 80% of the kids who went in that particular study desisted, it was because their criteria, exactly, their parents were bringing any kid who expressed any gender variant behavior into this clinic, and they were lumping all of those kids in as trans for the purpose of the study, but that's not what the study implied. What we actually end up seeing with regret rates, there are a lot of different numbers in the study, but in different studies, but usually what we're seeing is like 0.3 to like 3% is an average. But mind you, when we're looking at, so every medical procedure that's ever existed is going to have a regret rate. Medical regret is just a thing that happens because medicine is not perfect, because things that you can say are true about a population of people are not necessarily true for an individual. So sometimes, even though this works for 98% of people, it won't work for that one individual person because there are some confounding factors that make the treatment incompatible with that person. There are so many medical treatments that are not just commonplace, that we all know somebody who's had this done, that have higher regret rates than transition care does on average. This is a really uncontroversial thing. I also loved when Lux pointed out the vast majority of kids who take puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones. That's because our diagnostic criteria are so good. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we are really good at identifying
Laser accurate.
the trans kids. And so they're going on to take hormones because they're trans kids.
I mean, really what's happening there is that there are plenty of kids who do need the care who are not getting it still. Like, you know, there are plenty of kids who probably maybe just are non-binary and they don't fit like the binary system that is being used to, you know, put them into this category of whatever. Like, there are most people who want access to medical care don't get it. Like, I just want to put that out there. Most people who want access to medical care as trans people, like who want trans related care, we cannot access it. And children, most of all, like, do not have the ability to get that care that they want. So, like, yeah, all this like scaremongering about, oh, they're cutting everybody's tits off now, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't even matter. There's no scrutiny anymore. Like, yeah, no, it's not the majority of people still.
Right.
Right. Well, that that was like my main question. Thanks for clarifying everything. I mean, I guess there's definitely going to be a regret rate for, you know, knee surgery or whatever. So
It's really high.
I totally understand that. Yeah, but it's I mean, I guess the only thing is how do we like how do we bring this to the attention of, I guess, like I don't want to say the general public, because obviously the issue is like being discussed on the news every day. But like, how do you convince, say, your right-wing aunt who, or not even your right, like your apolitical aunt who doesn't really get involved in this stuff anyway, but who thinks that like we're hurting children because we're kind of roping them into, you know, something that they don't necessarily want, or, you know, those kinds of arguments. Like, because a lot of this stuff, like what you just explained, is gets a lot less airtime on the news versus having, you know, Ron DeSantis or whoever, basically, or even, you know, turfs like J.K. Rowling. Like,
yeah,
they get so much more time to parrot the stuff about how parents are being trendy and getting their kids.
A lot of people who
right?
don't even know a transgender person could probably name a detransitioner because they are literally given airtime and they are at every single hearing for an anti-trans bill because they are flown around by groups like the Heritage Foundation, specifically to pass these bills. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not sure that there's a meaningful single method that can be used to convert your Aunt Karen, who is just a total fucking bitch and who is, you know, believes in all the weird shit. I think there may be methods to approach each individual. For me, I just draw a really hard line with my family. Every single family member who has done something explicitly transphobic or voted for someone who is explicitly transphobic, I have said to them, I'm not going to be associating with you anymore because of who you vote for and the implications and the harm that that has for me and other trans people. And it doesn't mean I'm never going to talk to you again or interact with you when we're at family gatherings. But what it does mean is you will never get to know anything personal about my life. I will never give you details or be vulnerable with you in a meaningful way. Our relationship will always be surface level, and I will always have my guard up around you. I've done it for countless family members. I did it for a family member like a month ago who their son told a classmate who allegedly identifies as a cat. I'm not sure they do in the way that this person represented it, but even if they did, my nephew fucking bullied this kid, and my cousin was proud of her son for doing it. And I blew up on her for it because it was disgusting. Like, I don't care what this kid identifies as. You don't bully other kids. And the language that your kid is using is explicitly anti-trans, and you don't care about it, but you say you support me. Those things are incompatible. So now we are not going to have a relationship anymore until you are willing to reconcile with your views and apologize for how and why they were wrong. We're just done. And for me, that's personally how I handle those relationships. And it's not for everyone. I don't necessarily think cutting everyone off at the drop of a hat is necessarily the healthiest response either. But for me personally, I draw a pretty hard line. These are my values. And if you want to be a part of my life, you have to not violate them. It's that simple. Luckily, my mom and my stepdad are still chill, but we argue a fair amount because I don't let anyone off easy on this stuff.
I think you have a hard conversation about children to have. Like, because I think fundamentally at this whole parents are transing their kids, like, and I don't like using this as a verb. Like, I won't say, this kid is being transitioned or we're transitioning this kid. Like, I don't think that that's a good way to frame it because you're framing it as something being done to the child. So, like, I think that it's a hard conversation to have because people think that children are stupid. People think that children are incapable. People don't recognize that children are fully capable of understanding long-term consequences. They're capable of making medically informed decisions with the support of their parents. So yeah, I mean, like, setting aside the fact that there's also like a groomer implication there, the implication being that the parents are forcing something on their children, like that goes back to the Nazis. Like, it's the exact same rhetoric that they would use about how like being gay or being a crossdresser isn't innate. It's something that people rope you into doing. Those are the two hard hurdles that you run into with those family members or with those community members that you have is like two-sided. It's the number one, do you think that kids are stupid? Number two, do you think that parents are earnestly like risking their children's health in order to go on a trend? Why are you not taking this energy and directing it toward moms who go in and get boob jobs with their 16-year-old daughters? Because that's like a thing that happens. There's like, I'm sure mommy daughter nose job days. And yet we think that it's okay for them to make those kind of medical decisions. So like, yeah, I guess just making the comparison to like football injuries, like a knee injury from football could be like the surgery could be even worse than the original situation that you were in. And yet a 16-year-old footballer might consent to a knee surgery. So I don't know. That's kind of like the line of arguation you'd have to go with probably.
Right. I just think, maybe I'm off base here, but maybe we should like sort of prioritize mentioning the more reversible stuff like social transitioning and puberty blockers for younger children, and make it clear that like the least reversible transition care like surgeries are stuff that normally we reserve for even trans kids when they turn 18. Like we don't really do that on an 11-year-old anyway. So I think that might help sort of get a lot of people who are on the fence about the issue to view this in a more positive way.
I hear you, Richard, and I'll tell you, I've done that. I don't just. I sometimes I think I make it sound maybe different than the reality is. I don't just say like, "Oh, you crossed my line, I'm done with you." Usually, I always try to have a conversation with this person first and explain this language is harmful for trans people for this reason. trans people aren't getting this kind of healthcare. Trans people are getting this
5-year-olds
kind of
are cutting their
healthcare.
hair. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I do all of that, and I walk them through it when they're close to me. And to be honest, it has not changed a single person close to me personally's mind on the issue. If they were against it, that's just where they are. I've changed lots of people's mind on this show, so they say. I think it's easy for people who are not in the hot seat, who hear me grilling someone in the hot seat, to be like, wow, those arguments are compelling, and to change their mind. But I think it's a mistake to think that you're going to change a person's mind by arguing with that individual that often. I think really what you should do is just be out there advocating for the good information. This is what trans healthcare for minors looks like. These are the steps it goes through. These are, this is what the regret rates for trans healthcare look like. This is how accurate our diagnostic models are. Like, you can go out there and put out the good information, but I think that is honestly a lot of times the best you can do. And I mean, aside from like, if you want to do like direct action or like, joining some local group doing like actual work for individuals, like for getting the good information out there,
Right.
it's you can do the debates for sure. And I think it's good when people who know what they're doing and know their stuff do the debates. But I think it's a mistake to assume that you're going to change your aunt's mind or your uncle's mind or your dad's mind. I think a lot of those people are pretty comfortably set in their ways and aren't really interested in challenging their views. It's a difficult situation.
Right.
Like, I encourage people to try, have the conversation.
Just don't have high expectations.
Yes, exactly. You just can't have the expectation that they're going to change. That's what I always approach it, hoping for the best and fully expecting that they are going to bury their head in the sand and not make any movement at all.
Right. I mean, I usually don't have high expectations, on a one-to-one thing. It's just that, I guess I have higher expectations when it comes to, I guess society as a whole. Like I see the reverse of that we're kind of going backwards in, in some ways, unfortunately. But I still think that as long as there's the right-wing talking points that are usually used, especially the ones surrounding sexualizing it, like the idea that there's a lot of conflation of sexual abuse or sexual topics regarding minors and transgender care for minors. I think some people tend to like to do that because there's a very strong emotional response whenever you bring up, minors and sex. So it's, they like the idea of conflating oh, well, you want them to transition their gender. Well, you must be a groomer. And then a lot of people, an image comes to mind that's far darker than, than anything that was ever mentioned, right? There's no talk of sexuality here. It directly, at least indirectly, obviously. It's all just well, you're grooming children, like some of the priests in the Catholic Church were. And I think that kind of talking point resonates with far too many people. So I kind of hope that there can be other better talking points that are also more widespread, and that hopefully, in the near future, the tide's going to turn and you're going to get, 70, 80% support for, for gender affirming care overall. And
the thing
sort
is,
of
though,
not,
I think in most,
I just hope that we can defeat the talking points in wider society.
I think in most states, though, the polling on people's support for transgender care is actually pretty good. I think most adults in America really don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. The radicals, who are unfortunately a lot more than I'm, like to think about sometimes, do give a lot of credit to these arguments, but it's exhausting. I mean, we kind of had this conversation already earlier in the show, how many times do we have to point to examples of, conservative religious people abusing children? I mean, how often do we have to point to the conservatives defending child marriage bills? How often do we have to point to every other group than trans people or queer people in general abusing children systemically to get people to understand that just because you guys are all thinking about abusing children all the time doesn't mean that we are. It you know, I'm sorry, I'm flabbergasted. Normally, I feel like I have better responses for this, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. We kind of talked about this earlier, and it's like the best you can do is just keep showing them all the examples and all of the ways in which conservatives are hypocrites on this matter. I mean, like, I think the conservative defense of child marriage is a really good one. Like, you can't pretend that you are protecting women and girls when you are advocating for the ability to marry girls. And you know, like we talked about earlier, we can substantiate our claims on every individual who we accuse, yet they accuse an entire group of people with no basis. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know. These talking points are old and haggard, and I think they really are out there. It's just that, unfortunately, talking points that have been circling the queer community for decades take like another decade to filter their way up to the mainstream political sphere. I mean, like maybe AOC has acknowledged this once, but that's probably about all that's happened, and I don't even know if she's done that. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess in America, I mean, I've never lived there, so, you know, I'm constantly flabbergasted by, you know, by Republicans pushing the envelope. But, you know, I mean, for example, the Roe v. Wade thing, I honestly thought that was a settled issue, you know, long ago. I really hope we don't go the same direction here, but
well, I think we need to brace ourselves for going the same direction. The newly elected Speaker of the House that was just elected yesterday or the day before literally sponsored a bill that would hypothetically define all transness as sexual and prohibit exposure to transness to anyone under 10. Like,
but Richard lives in Canada, so maybe there's like hope for their government there.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think there's hope for Canadians. I mean, Justin Trudeau, when the GC riot, I forget where that was, it was a couple months ago, but he made a public statement saying transphobia is not welcome. We stand against those specific like calling out specific rioters and what they stood for, or like counter protesters or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, the 1 million moms or whatever the hell it was called.
Yeah, that's really impactful, and I think that's more than what Biden has done. So, like, I think that individual act is more impactful than a lot of the stuff that Biden has done individually. So, I don't know. I think there's hope. I'm on like a sliver of hope for sure. But it waffles for me. Some days I'm like, hey, I'm seeing a lot of really good political momentum. I think maybe we really have a shot at like some really powerful political victories and turning this around. And then other days I'm like, man, I don't really know. It feels all hopeless. I think it's normal to kind of go between those two states based on where we're at politically. I really think it's naive to say that it's going to turn out okay. And I think it's naive to say that this is going to end up like World War II all over again. I think we are not close enough to tell, but we are close enough that we're all very angsty about which way it's going to go. And I think it's very reasonable for us to be stressed and wishing there were better talking points and wishing we could counter the misinformation. But unfortunately, we've had this show for 2 years and we've been countering misinformation for 2 years. And you know what? People still call in with the same topic every fucking week. And it's just how it is right now. And that's why we do this show, to try to, you know, be some sort of force against that kind of thing. But I think it'd be naive to think that because I do a a call-in show that some meaningful societal shift is going to happen. Like, I think maybe we'll impact some individuals for sure, and that's meaningful, but there needs to be some bigger scale change. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you, Richard. We got to move on to Super Chats, so I'm going to have to let you go, but thank you for calling in, Richard. I appreciate the stress about misinformation and trying to get the good stuff out there. It's rough out there, but just keep having conversations with people close to you, and hopefully it'll make a difference one day.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Richard. See you later.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move on to super chats, but I'm going to take a second to end call in studio first. That way we can save on that money and not have it running throughout the whole super chat portion. All right. God, I wish I could stop coughing.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. All right. We've got £5 from Sean Isherwood. The sum of the first n squares is n times n plus 1 times 2n plus 1 divided by 6. If n equals 24, the sum is 70 squared. Also, that sounds bad, Arden. I'm glad you're mostly better. Thanks, Sean. Also, no thanks for the fucking math that you made me have to read.
No, thank you. I'm gonna give that back. $5 from Aubrey. Gay. Thank you, Aubrey.
True. $9.99 from Ramona. I live in New Hampshire, a swing state, so I don't really get the privilege to vote against Biden, regardless of how I feel. For the record, fuck Biden. Hashtag Team Arden, articulating my frustration. Yeah, it is a little bit harder when you're in one of those very purple states. You kind of, the moral imperative on you to push things is a lot stronger.
I'm privileged to live in a state where I no longer have the right to use public restrooms. I'm sorry.
Yeah, very, very privileged.
$5 from Samantha Shepard. Thanks for the show. Hashtag Team Arden. Thank you, Samantha.
Thanks. I still haven't gotten the counter buttons working, so there's an honor system going on here. Like,
do I need a tally?
I'm not doing a tally, but I think there's like a sense, like I get a vibe, like, oh, there was a lot of Team Martins today or whatever. Like,
someone in the chat can pay attention.
Sure. We'll get it back on eventually.
$5 from Jason Jones. Hashtag Team Arden. Glad you're well again. 1, is a solid black Western hognose a possible morph? And 2, Luxander, did you play the 7th saga on SNES? You got the first question, right?
I don't know that I've ever seen a fully melanistic Western hognose. There are some really dark ones. Like if you look up Sable, the Sable morph, it's a recessive gene. It is pretty dark just on its base. And I imagine with some like dark lines of Western, you might get close to black, but there are currently no black morphs as far as I know.
I did not play the 7th saga on SNES. Should it be on my list? Maybe it should be. I don't know.
I just started playing Super Mario Wonder. Matt got it as a month early birthday gift because I was like, I really want to play it, but I can't afford to spend $60 on a video game right now. And it's pretty fun so far. All right. We've got 20 pounds from Jackie Greenland. I miss watching a bunch of shows live, eclipse chasing in Nevada. Miss congratulating the team on 100K last night as well. So I'll say congratulations here. We all know this is the best show on the line. Anyway, hashtag Team Arden. Thank you so much. Yes, this is definitely the best show. I watched the eclipse, was it like a week ago? There was an eclipse that came over Texas. Well, I mean, it was over the whole fucking planet, but you could see it really well from Texas. It was really cool too because all the trees, the shadows from the trees made like a million little pinhole cameras. So like there was the coolest shadows I've ever seen all over the driveway. It was pretty cool. We didn't have glasses to look at it, so that was the best I could do, but very cool.
It was cloudy here.
Yeah?
Yeah, there was just no chance. It was completely overcast.
No, you could definitely, if I had glasses, I definitely could have looked at it, but was not prepared. Didn't know it was happening until it was like 5 minutes away.
I don't know what those are, but there is 120 of them from Pedro Glosser. First of all, I love them, but Matt and Jimmy should not get all the congrats just because they were on air when it happened. So congratulations on 100,000. It was awesome to watch the journey here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I think when Transatlantic started, we were close to like 50,000. It was in March of 2021, I'm pretty sure was our first episode. So if someone wants to go back on like Social Blade or something, I imagine there's a way to track what the subscribers were at that point. I don't know. But I think it was around 50 to 60,000. So it's been cool to watch it grow so much. It was like really slow for a while, and then we've had a few bumps, but yeah, recently we've been on a crazy uptick. So love to see it.
I've been stuck at 30K for so long.
Oh, really?
Oh my god. Yeah, I'm just strapped there.
The algorithm, man. Another 120 check Karunas, check sex, whatever the fuck you want to call them, from Pedro Glosser. Second of all, shout out to Katy, the first and for now only representative of our side of the Atlantic among the regular hosts. Yeah, I mean, I do not intend or desire at all to do this forever. I do this because I think I'm decent at making arguments sometimes when I'm on good form, and so I feel compelled to because I don't like the arguments I hear other people make sometimes. That's kind of why Katy and I started doing the show, because a lot of the debates we were seeing were so shit that we were like, we need a call-in show, and we need to only have hosts and guest hosts who like are very scientifically and skeptically minded, so that when they're coming at these questions, they're, you know, coming at it from an empirical basis. And you know, sometimes people come at us with personal questions, so you don't need empiricism. But yeah, I would love to have more hosts on, although it is difficult because scheduling when people are 6+ hours ahead can be very difficult, because all of the production is in Central Time, except for I don't know where Morgan is. Also, I don't know if I was supposed to say that he might be on production, but whoop, said it. So
well, here's another one. Sorry,
no worries.
I was like, oh shoot, it's getting really close to my partner getting home. So another 120 check units from Pedro. Third and final. Glad you're doing and feeling better, Arden. But I got to give this one to one of my favorite The Line guests ever. # Team Lux. Oh no.
No, Lux is one of my favorites.
First Team Lux. Oh, thank you.
So we don't.
I'll
have
be back
that
in
many
November.
Super chats left, so we should be able to get you out and done before your partner gets home.
Cool.
We've got 666 from God Hates Astronauts, # Team Luxander, but you're both rock stars. Thanks. Next one.
499 from Luis Richardson, # Team Arden. Biden is a good man. He did remark to Israel that it is too easy to react inappropriately to an attack as we did after 9/11. I mean, I feel like that's a fair enough point, Luis. I mean, I guess if he did say that, I'm not going to agree that he's a good man, but you know.
I mean, the problem is though that he's 100% only saying that because he was like, we fully support Israel and whatever they do, and then they started just bombing the shit out of Gaza, and he had to be
the
like,
hospital.
He had to be like, whoa, okay. When I said we support anything you do, I mean like, let's be rational about who we bomb to death. And it's like, bro, you could have just released a slightly more reasoned statement at the get-go, but you know, it's difficult because international relations, we have a very long relationship with Israel, and so it's not exactly easy for the president to give a nuanced take on this. I mean, like, he kind of has to give full-throated support for Israel, whether or not that is the moral or right thing to do. It's a very shitty situation.
Agree. Is this one mine again?
I think this one too. Wait,
it's cool. 10. I don't know. It's fine. 10 pounds from Freakish Uproar. Howdy, Heart's Face. What Luxander was saying about it as a pronoun was interesting. I'd worry about calling somebody it, even if they asked me to. I would respect it, of course. Yeah, I understand. Like, it feels weird initially to use them. Like even still, sometimes I'll goof, but it's just practice. Just takes practice. And like getting comfortable with it, and maybe like, I guess the more you understand someone's reasons for wanting to be called it, then the easier it is to see them the way that they want to be perceived. So I guess I kind of get why people, you know, are interested in those sort of explanations. But yeah, it's good to try to just be respectful.
I think there's also like that it's just usually used in English as like an impersonal pronoun thing, that using it as a
Sure.
personal pronoun is like a brain switch. But I mean, it's like,
So was
again,
they though. Like
yeah,
if you talk
exactly.
to an older person who really had it crammed into them that they were not supposed to ever use they in that generic sense, then like yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's a suck it up
Someone left
buttercup
his or her
moment.
phone on the table. Like they would literally say his or her phone on the table rather than their phone. So like yeah, it's like a process for everybody to get used to.
Yeah. Either way, suck it up buttercup. We'll all get over
True.
it. $4.99 from Balthazar 22.8. I don't fully understand the differences between non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, at least in a colloquial sense. I think, honestly, though, the differences are, it's kind of like pansexual and bisexual, where like there are differences, but really you could talk to a pansexual person and a bisexual person, and they could describe it the exact same way. And I think you kind of have to talk to the individual to understand what that means. Like they're kind of broader terms to let you know, like, this person doesn't identify within the gender binary, but that doesn't really tell you much about what their identity is. It tells you what their identity isn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like non-binary explicitly is a declaration of what you are not. And so like non-binary obviously is going to be a really broad term that just means you don't fit in with or identify completely as either a man or a woman. And
Right.
like you could expect a non-binary person to perhaps want to use they them pronouns, or perhaps to want to dress differently or whatever. Like a gender fluid person, you might expect them to dress more masculine on one day and more feminine on another day. Like a gender queer person, you might expect them to dress like in a particularly flamboyant manner, like a particularly subversive manner. But like that's the main difference, is like it can kind of tell you what you might expect from someone, but it's just a way of them compartmentalizing their complex experience and like trying to communicate it as best they can. But like yeah, broadly speaking, they all just mean I'm not explicitly trans, or sorry, I'm not explicitly cis is what I was trying to say.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a problem with identity labels in general. I feel this about sexuality all the time, that I'm like, I feel like I don't know what anyone means when they say they're a certain sexuality anymore, because like
Yeah,
there are so many nuances. And now that like trans people are such a conversation around sexuality too, and people have so many feelings about it, I'm like, you say you're gay, that could be like transphobic for all I know. And you could be like, I'm same sex attracted. And like I genuinely don't know anymore. And so I'm just kind of like trying to abolish me having expectations for what identity labels mean, and just kind of be like, cool, I know what you call it. Now can you explain what it is to you? Because
yeah, what do you
those
actually
are
mean by it?
two totally different things.
Right.
Uh $4.99 from, wait, oh, did I read the last one? I'm
I don't
sorry.
care, it doesn't matter, just go.
Okay, from Ben Nine Lives. Live and let live. If you don't want to dance, no one is forcing you. Just don't be adding more hate in a sometimes overly hateful world.
True.
Word. Put that on a plaque in a like suburban mom's house.
True. Ben 9, what a great name. $10 from Jifka. This is the Trump/Chappelle phenomenon. People see a celebrity spewing the same vile stuff that they believe, and they feel validated. And then that celebrity feels validated by the bigots, and they double down. Right. It's like a circle jerk kind of situation a little bit.
Yeah. Also, I didn't realize their name was Ben 9 until you said that, and now I just can't stop thinking that they're like Ben 10, but they like lost one.
Yeah, he's lost one. He hasn't leveled up yet.
He's
He's
Ben
gonna
9.
hit the final boss soon. He's got to collect this one last ability, and then he can take out the final boss.
I'm rooting for you, Ben 9. You can ascend. $10 from Mo Scoville. Hey Mo, living in the age of justifiable anxiety. Love the show. Keep being awesome. Hashtag Team Arden. Yeah, that is really what it feels like all the time. And you know,
True.
living in a red state, it is always nerve wracking. But Texas is like maybe kind of close to being purple. There's always like a moment during every election where I'm like, oh wait, and then it's
Me
like,
too.
oh nope, it's red again.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. Me too. Every goddamn time. Oh gosh. $5 from Dylan Fuller. Luxander, do you know Caduceus Clay from Critical Role? Your amazing hair reminds me of his early design. His level 20 hair is also pretty fire. I don't watch Critical Role, but I'm so happy for all of you who are fans of it. There's just too much for me to get into. I don't know that I enjoy listening to other people play D&D. But yeah.
Yeah, I
Cool
feel
characters,
similarly. I never really got into Critical Role. I get that they're all like voice actors and stuff, and that can be fun. I'm sure they're funny, but I just not for me. $20 from Larry Fishman. # Team Arden. I'm curious about your HRT implant. I'm happy with my intramuscular estrogen injections, but I want an option in case the shit hits the fan and I have to run for higher ground. Would you recommend the HRT implants? I don't know that it's like a, revolution happens and society falls apart solution, because you still have to get new implants regularly. It's just
like every few months, right?
Yeah, it's like every like 5 months now instead of every it's not like I'm doing it once a week, but like
Sure.
it's still regular. And like when my pellet starts to run out, like I feel it. Like I'm like, oh, my body's not right. And it's been about 5 months. It's that time. I think I need a new pellet. And so, that's when you call the doctor, get the blood work done and all that stuff. It's very convenient for life in current society, but if you think it's like a apocalypse solution to keeping your hormones going, that is not it at all. Probably like a massive stock of pills is going to do you better in an apocalypse situation than this will, but
Get a mare.
or like synthesize your own estrogen like they used to in the olden days.
Yeah. $10 from Boudingus. Great show. I have been frustrated with the Democrats for years. Taxation without representation is alive and thriving in the U.S. Yeah, we won't get into a whole thing again about it, but yes, I do agree that we are lacking certain amounts of representation. It's not just red states. People in blue states, like Republicans in blue states, also don't feel very well represented. So whatever, it's a problem everywhere. But
I can agree there are definitely problems. Nope. Resist, Arden. I'm so tempted.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
I'll have to invite you on my show sometime where we can just go about whatever.
Yeah, I have strong feelings about electoralism and politics, so I would like to, but not right now. 99 from Balthazar228 again. I still can't believe that one chess organization banned trans women from competing and stripped trans medals. Were they scared trans players can turn kings into queens and vice versa? I mean, it's not even just one chess organization. Like, let's be clear.
It was the chess organization.
The chess organization. Now, granted, women are allowed to compete in the open division, and women have competed and succeeded in a couple of instances in the open division. But like Magnus Carlsen is like inarguably the best chess player of all time. He's currently like a reigning champion. He's just incredible, and he's talked about how probably part of the reason that women aren't playing chess as much and you're not seeing as many women in the open division is because chess has historically been shitty to women. And this is just a further, reification of that sentiment that chess thinks women are less than and would somehow be strategically at a disadvantage. The only other idea that I've heard some people suggest is that potentially they think some super high performing GM who has no shot against the top GMs, like the super GMs right now, could potentially transition to dominate the women's league. And it's like, that is so fucking astronomically stupid to me. Genuinely, I am flabbergasted that this is even a thing that exists. But yeah, I mean, it seems to me that most individual chess players, especially the top recognized ones, are pretty chill. They seem like they don't really have strong feelings about this. But I think misogyny just runs so deeply in chess that it's kind of hard to parse out. So I only know chess stuff because Matt watches a lot of chess content. I don't play chess. I don't really care for chess myself, but I'm like unfortunately informed on chess, so.
True. 1999 from Polish Kabash. Cis male Gen Xer here and love your show. I'm using the Socratic method. and remaining very patient, hoping my seed planting will make a difference. Keep it up. You are very much appreciated. Love you much. Thank you for the dono.
I admire people who have the patience to do the Socratic method. I don't. Anthony Magnabosco is like, he's very proud of the Socratic method and does not really fond of sometimes the method that I or like Matt or that other people here take. But look, sometimes you cannot just handhold people out of every bad belief they have. Sometimes they need someone to tell them that their belief is stupid and harmful. And that's just where it is. And but anyway, we got to wrap up the show here. I want to give Lex a chance, of course, to shout out. It's fucking stuff. Your content.
You got so close.
You
came so close. You got the pronoun out, and then it couldn't keep the sentence going.
I know. It's really terrible. I was like...
No, it's good.
Anyway. But really quick, I want to shout out thank you to Jess for call screening today. We are so grateful for you. And thank you to all the mods, Dylan, Cookies, Stephanie, are who I see in chat right now. If anyone else is in chat, feel free to yell at me. I'm really grateful for all you guys do. You keep the chat safe and productive, and you keep sending shitty people out of the chat and into the call screening so that we can talk to them directly on the bigger platform than they'd ever get in chat, no matter how much they like to complain. But anyway, Lux, you want to plug your stuff real quick?
Yes, I'm Luxander. You'll find me on YouTube at Luxander Real, or you can go to my website, luxander.net. We do live shows like 3 times a week, basically. So I'm actually supposed to be doing my show at 5:30 tonight. So if you want to go get yourself a snack and then come back for my show at 5:30, that's when we start. We talk about all kinds of different political issues. You can hear me go on about how I've accidentally become an anarchist in the last 6 months or so. And yeah, we talk about the laws and we break them down. So if you're interested in this kind of conversation, then join us over there. Hit subscribe on the channel on this one to help keep boosting it, and also on mine because I'm stuck at 30K. Thank you.
Do that. Also, I realized we missed a chat, and it's kind of an important chat that we should read. $10 from Jasmine Bryant. Love the channel, but I want to ask what attempts are being made to diversify the hosts for the show. I don't know if there have been any POC hosts for this show, specifically Black or brown trans hosts. So we've had a Black trans woman who's guest hosted. We had somebody who we were really trying to campaign to get on, but she expressed to us that the responsibility that she would bear being a primary host on this channel and being like one of the only POC hosts and a trans woman, no less, on a network like this would be kind of a burden that she just was not interested in bearing. And that's kind of the struggle we have, that even when we find voices that are really good, they don't really seem interested in wanting to be on that much, only because of the weight that bears, which makes sense to me. I mean, every race-related question is going to fall like entirely on your shoulders. You are going to feel entirely responsible for representing all people of color on this show. We definitely obviously want to have more diverse voices on this show, but it's a mixed bag for people who would be good hosts, whether or not they want to bear that responsibility, which we understand. Obviously, we're not going to be like, but you should. We're not going to pressure those people. Like, that makes total sense why they would feel that way. But I did want to address that question. Thank you for asking, because it is something that we're concerned about, and we really want to have more diverse hosts, but it's a complex thing, and like, it's really difficult. I understand where people are coming from when they reject that offer. So, yeah, if you guys have other voices that you really like, that you would like us to consider, definitely send them our way. We would love to hear from other people and consider it. Yeah. Also, $5, sorry, from Sean. Is sure what I know if I am personally. Might ask him what he thinks of the trans thing. Well, do that and let us know what they say. But until then, we are out of here, guys. So have a nice night.
Toodles. Later.
There's the outro music. I was like, is it not playing? What's happening? Did I fuck it up?